Well, thanks for joining the Rebuild the Weather Service session. I want this to be something where you guys get to get your minds really engaged. Would love your thoughts and feedback, even if it feels like fractions of thoughts. I hope this will be an interesting discussion for you to get into just the mindset of combining these kinds of data sets and how we can think about formulating policy solutions, something like that, off of integrated data. So I want to build on the conversation that was opened up in the last session and think about the way that the Weather Service is currently structured. And I'm mostly right now thinking of the local office structure, in part because that's where a lot of the integration with local communities takes place, is at that level. But if you can think of creative ways to get, I now work for NSEP, so if you can think of creative ways to get the national centers represented, I would love to see what you have in mind. And you might have actually ideas from what I was talking about earlier, that integration across those layers can sometimes uncover geographic vulnerabilities. So I want us to open our minds to erasing this map. And if we were to just start over and remake the Weather Service with some of its current organizational goals, what might it look like? And how would we make those decisions? What kinds of information do you think we would want to put together to try to illuminate that path? So I'm going to start us down the road with a definition of service equity. This is something that the Weather Service right now has as a very central value. It's trying to build equity into the way that different populations are served across the country. And I've borrowed this definition from environmental justice literature because I think that that's really an appropriate context to think about what we're really dealing with. We're talking about people who are exposed to hazards and their consequences in the environment differentially. And so I think that this is an environmental justice issue. And the definition of service equity can be broken into three pieces that you can think of as ways to balance and find fairness in the way that opportunities and risks and capacities are distributed. So let's go through the definition. But to the environmental justice literature, equity can be thought of as achieving that fairness and balance in access to environmental resources, in bearing environmental burdens, and in participating in environmental decision-making. I'll unpack each of these, and I think we can discuss. I'd like us to wrap our head around what each three of these things might mean in our context. So here's a way to think about a distribution of resources. And I think it's important to think about this both within and outside Weather Service control. I recognize that there are only certain amounts of the problem that Weather Service does control, but that doesn't mean we can't still consider it when we think about equity and if there are populations that we really need to give more attention to. You can think of quality of radar coverage. This gets a lot of talk in the weather community, but it is a really material concern. If you have ever lived in a radar gap, you know it's a problem. So that's something that the structure of where we place our Weather Service forecast offices could involve the quality of that coverage. Distance to the forecast office can be a resource because of the way that the forecast office can engage with the community. The quality of cell service, so the communication infrastructure that delivers that message, that can be a resource that's important in this situation. And then thinking about access to shelter and the quality of the housing stock. So what are your options for responding once a hazard has presented itself? Is there anything else you guys can think of that we might think of as a resource in this space, either in communication infrastructure or adaptive capacity, the kinds of things people can use to respond to the situation? What other kinds of resources might people have? Susan. Okay, so you could think of trying to map transportation, identify transportation nodes, networks, resources. Absolutely, yes. Yeah? Oh.
There are places in this country, like Dodge City, Kansas, where you get a lot of severe weather, but you cannot get people to go and be a forecaster there. Like, that's where people go and are exiled to.
That's Glasgow.
Yeah.
Get the heck into Dodge.
Yeah, right.
Says no one. Except me when I'm still chasing them.
Yeah, right.
I love Dodge City.
But yes, that's not typically where people like to go. I love that you've mentioned that, because human resources are a resource. And something that is so interesting about the Weather Service workforce is the way you move up in the Weather Service is to move around. So just as soon as maybe you have some grip on what the community you're serving is even like and who your partners are, you go to a completely different place. You're motivated. We motivate people to uproot. And we bring in people who aren't even necessarily from that area. So yes, I think residency and experience in that relationship, that depth of that relationship, can absolutely be thought of as a resource. That's a great one. Sorry, are we still broadcasting to the virtual audience? Okay.
Go ahead and read it. This is Steve Decker speaking, and he said this is related to distance to WFO, so whether or not a WFO is in the same media market as a user.
That is a wonderful one. And I don't know if the person who put that comment in wants to jump in and unpack that a little bit.
Steve, if you're there, you can jump in.
Sure. So I'm just thinking, I don't have personal experience in this, but my feeling is from kind of the outside. This is Steve Becker from ArcGIS University, by the way, I kind of thought of this because we're in the Philadelphia Mount Holly WFO, but we're in the New York media market. And so it's always been a little strange living where I live and having these two different sort of directions I'm looking for weather information. So.
Yep. And that feeling you have is something that I've heard repeatedly on the ground when I've gone in and done post-disaster assessments. It's really difficult to live in one of these places that's in between, where you have these split media markets and you're like on the fringes of those markets, or you're at the fringes of where Weather Service meets media markets. It poses a challenge too when we try to bring in people into an integrated warning team meeting. If you have a forecast office that touches like 8 media markets, maybe you're a little bit of a whole bunch of markets, who do you get to come to that meeting? And how in the world do you coordinate that hornet's nest? And that's a real problem at some forecast offices. And then the opposite is true. There's some broadcast markets where they have to follow like 5 forecast offices in chat. And let me tell you how that takes more time, more attention for the forecaster, the broadcaster, to be paying attention to all of those streams that they can't be on air. So there's a balance definitely to be struck. It is an attentional resource and it's a relational resource. Having those geographic boundaries match up does make everything more efficient. That's a really, really neat concept. Any other resources you guys can think of?
Tag along to what was said on the other side of the room about personnel is having personnel that speak languages that may be predominant in your WFO area.
Okay, so you're thinking in the forecast office, having a better representation of your people who actually are working on staff.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Think about the South, where I showed you the so-called black belt. A huge majority of the forecasters are white. What do you think it feels like to do community outreach? How open are those doors? There's a guy who works in NOAA Comms. He just actually started working on the NCEP side, but he's done he used to work in the forecast office in Jackson, Mississippi, and he was talking about how this was an important part of him being there. He actually formed inroads with community organizations that no one else had been able to by virtue of growing up in southern Louisiana, not that far away. So it is important to have diversity and representation. I think DEI is the secret sauce to actually improving the way that our weather service functions from the inside out. Because when we represent our populations, then we can engage, but we also have any idea what their problems are. It's no surprise that mobile home populations maybe have been overlooked. How many people do you know in our field who grew up in those circumstances? Most of us are upper middle class white. So that is a really important and awesome research to think about demographic diversity within the forecast office. Love, gosh, these are great creative ideas. I love all of this. Anything else?
Access to good surface weather observations. I'm guessing they're not as common in these marginalized areas, and that plays back into forecast verification, and which plays back into better forecasts.
Yeah, having better surface observation systems that will affect everything. The quality of the verification, knowing something's happening, just ability to warn those populations, comfort warning those populations. Forecasters want to warn where they're going to get a report. Whether we like it or not, there's a game. That's really, really a good resource.
Service, getting to some more of that infrastructure, the availability of computing resources, access to broadband. Most of Alabama does not have access to broadband, or cellular service. Both getting your message out and having the resources to do the work you need to do.
Yeah. So I'm repeating what you're saying for the value of the people who are listening in, not to. No, it's fine. I'm sure that they're having trouble hearing anybody in the audience, but the point was made. You could expand on cell service to include internet service. The state of Alabama, there's not broadband service there. That's another iniquity that just reinforces all the others. Okay, this has been great brainstorming. Let's move on to thinking about environmental burdens. It's a different frame. So these are the things that different people might have to bear differently in different places across the country. There's different places where you need to adapt to a whole lot of hazards. And some places that are less hazard prone. So things like climatology are important to consider, just your exposure to threat. Social vulnerability, I put that in environmental burdens because the people who are socially vulnerable are less able to shoulder that burden. So social vulnerability, the way that SOVI was created, that index that Andrea showed you earlier, is by training the data on things like recovery. Do communities recover after disasters? And what variables predict that? And what factors tend to predict poorer outcomes from when disaster strikes? So I put social vulnerability as a kind of burden. And you could think about the framing of communication systems too. So I thought along a similar vein, you could just say poor overall service across communication systems could be its own burden. Are there other things you guys can think about that might be burdens?
Kind of on the previous one, but kind of tied to this is the transportation aspect for the ability of WFO personnel to go to the affected areas and actually talk to them, like beyond damage surveys in isolated areas. It's like go talk to communities. If it's hard to get there, they aren't going to build those connections.
Oh, so you're thinking like disasters leave an opportunity to dialogue with a community, and if it's far away, you're not as likely to be able to do that. And interestingly enough, I think I'll build on that really quickly, that there are some events where you have so many possible tornadoes, like not everything gets identified and surveyed when you have a limited workforce. And who do you think is left out?
Kind of the flip side of that, the ability of people to evacuate. And whether or not your office itself has to evacuate during these events. So considering those impacts and what sort of services you may need to provide if people can't easily evacuate, either due to financial burdens or lack of infrastructure, or so that gets a little bit into that social vulnerability, but also if you have to constantly be evacuating your office,
Yeah.
how do you provide the service?
Oh yeah, evacuating is such a burden, and absolutely. So thinking about having to go through that processing, what supports need to be there, are they there? Yeah.
Whether or not you actually have to evacuate your personnel.
Yeah, and yes. Yeah. Evacuating personnel that from just the office because you're actually living in the hazard-prone area. Is that what you're thinking of?
Well, that too, I was thinking of two, both of those, like evacuating people who you're serving, but also the people who are providing the service. Yeah, if you have to evacuate in the middle of it, it really throws things off.
You know, I can't help but feel this really deeply living in Norman, Oklahoma because of work. The reason, like there's many of us who are put into hazard-prone areas to be where the hazards are, and it's intentional in a strange way. But yeah, that comes with the territory. So there are operational units that have to make those choices and know and get their families out safely while they're working. And yeah, that's a very definite burden borne by that population. Sorry, I saw some hands kind of coming up. Sorry, did you have one? Okay. You're like, if you want to, go for it. Yeah.
I would wonder, well, I guess social vulnerability probably falls, what I was thinking probably falls underneath the umbrella of that. So.
You know what? Social vulnerability is so huge. And what I love about you bringing out one piece of it is that, and this is why I showed you all those individual maps earlier, to show you what kinds of variables exist in different places, because each one will have a particular influence on, like, evacuation decisions, or, you know, like the way things play out is a function of sort of each individual component. So think of the social vulnerability index as trained just generically on a huge set of not just weather disasters, but all kinds. We don't have specific SOVI for tornadoes, for hurricanes. It's and on and on and on. So it does sometimes behoove us to break those little elements that make up the combined index out to see how each operationalizes, you know, individually. So go ahead and just, which piece do you want to take?
General education.
General education, and talk more about that.
So if you live in a place that doesn't have a solid education system, people oftentimes don't have the foundation to make a good choice in a risky situation.
You know what? You're actually ahead of me a little bit. I kind of couch that into this next category, but in participation in decision making, I think the same way. I don't think you can participate in the decision making process as well if you don't know what's going on. And so, yeah, if you come from a place with poor science education, you are very much less likely to know what's going on. And interestingly, I've seen this play out in some forecast offices. There's the Birmingham office, Kevin Laws is their SUE, and he's been very public about this, so I'm happy to share it. He feels like the forecast office is being called upon to replace the dwindling funding coming from the state to do science education. Meteorology is being stripped from these curricula because the only way they get money is for, you know, standardized testing in math and reading. And so that's where all these struggling districts put all of the few eggs they have. And it's really devastating because the way that a lot of parents learn about current, you know, safety information, where to get information from, how it's coming through the modern channels, you know, like, and immigrants, the way they learn is through their children. That's how you overcome the gap in disaster subculture, is through children. And so what he does, instead of having the relationships with emergency managers on the fringes, like he has relationships, but he spends his time that is limited in schools because there's a trade-off. He's got to figure out what's the biggest bang for the buck. And that's the reality in a place like southern and central Alabama. So that is, I'm totally on your wavelength, and I think this is a nice place to think about the third piece, participation in environmental decision-making. So in this frame, we think about environmental justice as an ability to be self-determined, that people can make the choices for themselves that they want to make. And so with this, I actually have sort of, it might seem like a creative category, but I put probabilistic information in under this as compared to deterministic approaches. The deterministic warning system it puts the whole burden of deciding when a risk is worth attending to on the shoulders of the forecaster for all the populations they serve. It has to get to a point where, oh, now I'm certain enough, or the impacts are going to be dire enough that now I'll throw down the trigger. And that's a one-size-fits-all approach. But you could be a person who is more risk intolerant than that, and you want to have something at an earlier point so that you can do something like evacuate a mobile home. Putting out more information can be seen as improving environmental decision making, as long as it's delivered in a way people can receive and understand, and not overwhelm them. But yes, I put that in there, and then community education outreach and engagement from scientists. So I was thinking the forecast office example, much like what you were thinking about with just education, science education. Are there other things we can think of that might help people to participate in this kind of environmental decision making? What other capacities might they have?
Well, this kind of also gets back to the social vulnerability and things like that. You know, when people are making decisions, you know, it's like I have a lot of experience with people in New Orleans who say, I couldn't afford to leave. Or I couldn't afford to leave my house. I didn't have the gas to leave. So being able to make your recommendations for evacuation based on kind of the community demographics and their experience, their lived experiences. And the only way to do that is you have them in the decision-making process.
Sure, yeah, and their ability to respond is constrained by their resources to do so. They might want to, but if they don't have the means, they can't. And so having them in that loop, so yeah, it could look very different from that perspective.
I would wonder for people that are at jobs like Amazon and stuck at a job, even when a tornado warning is issued, they can't leave, you know, and if the decision makers at that business are more interested in business than the lives of their employees, or they don't believe the warning, which is another rabbit hole we can go down, then that might be another one.
Organizational constraints, oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the December 2021 Mid-South tornado outbreak, both in Mayfield, Kentucky, and in southern Illinois at the Amazon factory. That was happening at both of those places.
Can I share a story about that?
Sure.
Well, not about that particular event, but I used to work for state government in Alabama, but I was not in Montgomery where the majority of offices were. Our office in Tuscaloosa, which is very different weather than what's happening down in Montgomery, in theory couldn't close unless Montgomery closed.
Oh, wow.
Luckily, we have a sane state geologist who would say, I can't officially close, but go home.
Yeah, but that's still taking a risk.
Yeah, but it's,
organizational policy has a place implication.
Yes.
School systems will probably be the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really cool one. All right. Without further ado, I think I'd like to give you guys a question. I want you to sort of brainstorm. We've been talking a bit about different things that you can get when you're closer to a weather service forecast office. So I'd love you just to have a moment to assemble it all for yourself. Before we go into like the next part of this, I want you to just sit down with maps and either pull things into ArcGIS Online. You can sign up for an account for free if you want to, or just put images into Google Slides or whatever. Just be looking at maps and thinking about how you would tackle this question, what kinds of things you would prioritize and why. And so just for a couple minutes, on your own, I'd love for you to brainstorm what are the opportunities for building equity or the challenges to building equity when we're thinking about siting of these forecast offices. What are some of the things, what does it get you when you're close to a forecast office? And part of this is we're going to recognize there's some things, some of these challenges that being near a forecast office can help alleviate, and there's some things where maybe we're going to be trying to think about put a forecast office near a population where we can't help them with their other problems, but we can offset their burdens by at least giving them the benefit of what we can give them. So I'll give you a couple minutes here to do that brainstorming, and then I'll bring us back together to share some of our ideas, just so we can all be on the same page going into the next part. I should have had some music going in the background. Hope it's not too quiet. You do look like a DJ back there. You know what? Find a song. We'll go through a song, something that you can find. A little bit longer than Jeopardy. But I mean, we could always. Does anyone know John Fawcett, the guy who wrote all the different weather service songs like 20 years ago? He was the WCM, then retired as the MIC of the El Paso office. He wrote a whole bunch of weather nerdy songs about like weather safety, and he got sued. He got sued, and they had to take them off the Weather Service website, but they still exist in corners. All right, if you haven't known of this guy, Google John Fawcett, Faussett. He's a treasure. And the song Skywarn Spotter. I'm going to make your day, guys. It's not on Spotify. It's going to have to just be Google. It exists only in pockets of the internet. I guess I could probably find it too. I don't know if I can share. Yep. Yes. Skywarn Spotter. Skywarn Spotter. We did not list Skywarn Spotters as a resource, but they are. But now you've gotten to know John Fawcett.
Everybody at their office on Zoom is having to explain to their coworkers. Like, no, this is serious. This is a work meeting.
Yeah, I feel bad because I couldn't share that to Zoom directly, so I had to turn on the room mic, so they heard a really sketchy version.
They're just like, what is going on over
I
there?
apologize, Zoom. I apologize.
Well, I saw that there were still some people jotting things down, but I think some people had finished, so we'll go ahead and just start the conversation. Okay, so let's assimilate from our conversation earlier. What value do you get when you're closer to a forecast office? Someone name something.
Trust building with your local community.
Trust building with local community, oh yeah,
Outreach events, open houses, and that just goes into what was just said.
Absolutely.
More spotters because it's easier to train them.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Even the student opportunities, I volunteered at an NWS office in State College, and I went to Penn State.
Student opportunities is a neat one because that's a neat way to think about building diversity and equity, right? If you have the forecast office in a more diverse community, maybe you could bring students up through that pipeline. I like that. Yeah.
A better forecast.
Better forecast.
So I just have been wanting to say for a minute that one of the things that makes me doubt forecasting or not take things seriously is the fact that some percentage of the time it's not right. Like yesterday afternoon, they were predicting thunderstorms and local flooding, but it never even rained. And if that happens enough times, you're just gonna be like, yeah, well, maybe. And I wonder to what extent the accuracy of the forecast, regardless of where it is, or the failed accuracy of it, diminishes the trust.
Yeah, I mean, having an understanding for what's behind the forecast when an event is predicted and it doesn't materialize, if you have an understanding for what's behind that, then you have built better trust. So I think that does definitely go into the relationship piece. If you have a relationship with your local forecaster, like as an emergency manager or other kind of local decision maker, yeah, that's going to be important. All right. I gave you guys some time to assimilate. We just talked about an overview of a couple things. You got to hear John Fawcett, so that was great. So now I'd just like you to have an opportunity to play with some maps. What time are we at right now? Perfect. Okay. So this will give you guys, I thought, if you could at least just look at things for maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes, give you to the top of the hour or so. I'd love you to just think about if you could optimize this over some set of these variables, physical, so the hazard climatology, combined with some social factors we've discussed today. How would you decide where you would put these forecast offices? How would you reorganize the National Weather Service? And we'll just, have the last 15 minutes or so talk about the different things you guys thought about putting together to create your framework.
Offices are in CONUS, and are we limited to that many?
That's a great question. So there are 122 local offices across the country, and I think that that's not just CONUS-wide. I think that also includes Alaska and Hawaii and Guam and all of that. But think around that number. I think if you want to get creative with the staff, how many people are in each office? Like a dozen or so?
Depends on if they have a hydrologist.
Right.
Depends on if they have tropical.
ITO.
Yeah, it really does depend.
Really varies.
If you're in Dodge City, you can't keep them anyway.
Yeah, Dodge City. Poor Dodge City. They feel so maligned by this session. Yeah, okay. So.
I never answered my questions in chat when I was in Amarillo. That's the only reason.
Dodge City! Oh, I can sympathize with that. Okay, so different offices definitely adopt chat technology in different ways. Diffusion of innovations, man. Okay, so how about we just think about, you can either have something like the current number of offices, 120 or so, or you could think about parsing the workforce apart if you want more offices, or putting them together if you think there's an advantage to having fewer offices but more staff in a centralized location for some reason. Might as well be creative. But it's a lot of offices. And with that, do you want to roll some more John Fawcett? Maybe a little bit quieter in the background for the thinking, and we'll reconvene at around the top of the hour. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I wonder if you might be able to just either show me or do a quick demonstration of maybe how you would recommend getting started with ArcGIS Online.
Oh, sure.
I've not used that before.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, if you guys haven't seen this before, I think you're still able. Okay, so just Google. You can Google ArcGIS Online. It's this. And when you go there, there's a sign-in thing. As I move, I think if you click sign in, you can create an account. So I have my username and stuff, but if you need to create an account, you can just click create an account. And you can start the free trial. So if that's something you want to do, is go into ArcMap. Yes, just sign me up. Sign me up. You have to click sign me up like 30 times. I forgot about this. But yeah, you just put in a couple pieces of basic information, and I think it'll have you choose your username and That's all there is to it. So a couple of minutes to set that up. But once you're in there, you can search through a variety of layers.
Would you go to like the Living Atlas as a starting point, or?
Yeah. I mean, without logging in?
Oh, for example, I did the free public account,
Okay.
and now it's giving, it gives you a few options to pick from.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's, okay. I'm going to go ahead and sign in so that you can see what the interface looks like. So, you can click content. And so I've already created a couple of different maps for different studies, but you can, let's see, there's a search. Oh, goodness. Here, I'm going to start at the Living Atlas where you thought about. Okay, yes, Living Atlas could be a neat place to start, but there's a, let me find it, sorry. Thank you for asking me to do this. This will help people. Yeah. When it's been a while since you started up and you're just used to going into your stuff. I'm just going to go to the search bar because I think, yeah, search for maps, layers, apps. Just go to the search thing up in the upper right-hand corner, and you can pull in things like NWS, CWA boundaries. You can just search for it, and there's layers, county warning areas for the country. There's a variety of different ways that it's been done, but you can find that, and just all you have to do is click on it and open in Map Viewer. And that is it. And after that, you're able to, you can add whatever you want to your map. So there's this one layer. Yay, we have all the county warning areas in the US. Then you can continue to add layers and just search. So here we can look for census data that can help you to pull in any of the, it's not under my content, this is going to be ArcGIS Online or Living Atlas. You can just see what everybody else has put on there. And you can find US Census. So there's the redistricting blocks, census tracts. There we go, US Census 2020 redistricting tracts. Let me look at US Census county data. We've got the USA Census counties. You can look at the description, see the different kinds of stuff that's in it, the tiger data that you heard about earlier. So yeah, just if you want to put everything directly into a map and play with it, then that's an easy way to do it. And then some of the hazard data you can get from places like, I know SPC has tornado, climatology, KML. KML is the extension for GIS data, and they have a whole page for maps and data and a GIS page to pull in things like climatology and any of their current products and storm reports. So with the time available, if you guys want to do that and play with the maps and get into the data, I know that we're already to the top of the hour. If you want to just do that for the rest of the time, I'm happy to have us use the time that way. I think you guys need a little more time to be able to strategize. But let me know if you have any more questions. Mm-hmm.
Would you say I should start with story map, urban, or geoplanar? Given those
Are those the
situations?
different background choices?
Yeah, it says like ArcGIS Suite, and it's got those 3 buttons I can pick.
Whatever, are those different, do they have different costs associated? Was that where they have the different packages that?
Probably. I don't know. I'll just
Here,
story map.
let me look.
Okay.
It might just be story map, because that lets you just put the things together and it's free. Oh, wow, this is actually new from when I saw it last.
It wouldn't let me sign up because they're like, you have an EDU address. So
Oh,
they're like, go to your school, so.
Oh.
School's like, oh yeah, we have everything. Go
Okay,
for it.
that's
But I don't know
why.
what to go for.
Go ahead and just, yeah, do try the story map. This is interesting. Story maps. Tornado coming to your town. So good, you mean? Wow, that's huge. Instructions. Yeah, just want students to go to ArcGIS Online. Oh, that's so much fun. This is so stupid. I have no idea.
Just have to complain to the Department of Planning and
Right?
Landscape Architecture now.
I don't know why they made it so obtuse. Because usually the things they would want you to download are just like park content, you know, like
Right.
there's recent looking for content.
I'll try that stuff.
Yes, try that. Just try this. Give it a whirl. Link to download them. I'll send it in minutes. But
It's faster than the hotel.
it's faster than the Wisconsin website for other things.
Yes.
And my son is also he's stopped, you know, and guitar. So he's not been
We'll wrap up at the last 5 minutes, and I'll let you guys share any of your creative ideas. Just see what frames you're putting together. You know, it's amazing. You know it is. That's awesome. This is awesome. Just entire he has a CD of all these songs.
Apparently he is on Spotify, according to
Okay.
Zoom chat.
Okay. John Thompson, actually.
Yeah, someone asked to leave their name and then someone put a spotlight playlist in there.
This is what everyone's going to carry away from my church today. Is
Yes.
John Thompson.
I love it though. I recall it. You know, what? It's made
Yeah. Yeah, they're all about death. His songs do that. If we don't do the right things, we probably will die.
Yeah, I wish I knew about this before today.
Kids never having kids, like I know, like that's all I think. But when they were little, like they're in the background of songs. It's the work. Yeah, I'm glad that's pretty cool.
It's all manner of
that we started like a couple minutes late. So, kind of wrapping up, that'd be great. But then we have a break, so some flexibility. Totally gonna play these games. Yeah, in the future. I don't know how we'll make it work, but this is awesome. It's just so fun. Yeah, it's so great.
Got time for just one more before we have to wrap.
Maybe you should pick each
Oh, yeah.
See if you can. What side is?
Right? Yeah, I would be very popular with this being the things that I intend to do.
Part of public government.
Oh, right, this one's over. Let me do one, two, three. Sure. Look at that. All right. This is very apropos of the conversation. It's called One Team. One Team.
Nice.
Working together.
I like it.
Integrated communication system.
When I wrote down his name in my book, I realized the weather was it's only like it's actually well created. It's called yeah. Yeah.
I just found it was like, it's like, you know what? I don't know where this is gonna be my hours. Because we had 4 idea sets, you know? They're out there like, what are you guys doing? They do. That song motivates us to come back and think about the structure of the weather service. All right, folks. Let's go ahead and wrap up our session. You guys had so many great thoughts at the start of it for just all the different pieces of what defines equity that we burned a lot of time that I know we didn't have a lot of time to spend dwelling in maps, but you might have at least had thoughts about what you would prioritize. How would you
try to balance, find that equity point. Is there anyone who'd like to share about some ideas that they had for things that they would try to put together?
The tribal lands and also the radars, because there's a lot of them that are like in radar holes.
Oh,
And
that's
the
interesting.
other issue is if we do outreach, whether it's the Weather Service or as a university, it could basically be a day gone to go out and reach those communities that are so far out because they're mainly in rural areas.
Yeah, so you would think about if we were to reorganize, maybe having more nearness to,
Yeah.
like at least having some nearness, that in the balance. Do you have that map made?
It's just sitting on here, but
Can you, if I stop sharing my screen, could you share yours?
yeah, I can do that.
There's not, all you have to do is just in the Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, if you are logged into the Zoom, I should have specified.
Well, I can do it from there then.
Yeah, you can do it from your seat. I was like, I mean, I'll move over for
But
you so you
I
can
want
have
to
the
go to
mic.
the Zoom here rather.
All right, well, while he's getting the map up for all of us to see what that looks like,
I think that's a really interesting observation, that tribal people find themselves at these boundaries more maybe than other populations. What else did you guys think about when you thought about this huge issue?
I thought very, very blandly, and I went to ChatGPT, and I said, hey, ChatGPT, let's have a hypothetical situation where we would like to pick up and move every National Weather Service office in the United States, have it no further than 75 miles away from another office. That way we can put a radar there and no one is looking any higher into the clouds than about 5,000-6,000 feet. And redistribute these across the United States at 75 miles apart. And I have a script to make a map, but I don't have all the lat long points for every single city quite yet. So I don't have a map for you. But yeah, it redistributed them just fine. This is why I love ChatGPT.
so your approach is just carpet bomb the whole country with forecast offices, and you don't have to worry about balancing
Who has one and who doesn't, who is farther away. I mean, that's a strategy. Yeah?
So I ended up not mapping. I ended up reading a National Academy's report on the benefits of NWS offices co-located with academic institutions. One of which I found fascinating. One of the benefits was better internet because they were on campus. Yeah, I was like, wow, that was an explicit one. But thinking about MSIs and HSIs and co-locating WFOs with those institutions that are already reaching out to those more marginalized communities, tribal colleges, that sort of thing. And then having them pool resources to have better internet in that location, that direct access to education, that sort of thing. So I don't have a map, but a map you could overlay would be where are those institutions and could a WFO partner up in those locations?
Yeah, well, for the benefit of people online, the idea was,
There's a National Academy study that found there were a lot of benefits for universities and forecast offices to be co-located. A lot of those are not especially minority serving institutions, probably very white dominant universities with these programs that are like the sort of the big meteorology programs. But man, what would it be like if you had minority serving institutions that you were based with? And what a pipeline builder that would be. Yeah, that's great.
You need to stop screen sharing.
it says, oh, you need me to stop screen sharing. Yep, all right. I think it's telling me that I have stopped sharing, but you are still seeing my screen, so I'm just gonna do that. There we go. Feel free, go ahead and share.
There you go.
All right, so tell us what we're looking at.
So what we have are the CWAs in the blue, and then the red areas are the tribal lands, and then the dots are the radars. I was hoping to find a layer that had like the radar beam height, but I don't think that exists in this online verse of GIS stuff. But the areas I was thinking of, so I'm right here, this is where I'm located, and so we have a lot of tribal lands out here near the Canadian border, and that's a huge radar hole. And then once you get out here, and then pretty much everywhere out here is a radar hole. And then look at this area out here where you've got tons of tribal land and there isn't a radar there.
Yeah, that huge area of New
The
Mexico.
other thing I thought about was if you could
Wow.
quantify for each CWA, how long would it take to drive across that CWA? You think of like the Bismarck one where you go from this corner to this corner, and that's probably 6 hours to get across
Yeah.
it. And so if you're doing Skywarn spotter training, you can get to one town in a day, and there's of course the investment in sending someone out there. They probably got to stay overnight or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen as frequently.
That is such an interesting, I mean, this is this way because this is where we forced all of the native peoples. And so it is, you know, sort of lower population density areas and public lands and much bigger CWAs. That is fascinating. I know that we're coming up on time. How much time do we have now, or what time is it?
We're kind of in that bleed period.
That bleed period, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any final thoughts anybody has?
So I don't know the details, and I'm bugging my friend who's in the Weather Service Office of Observations about it. But there's a next gen radar effort coming out of the Weather Service that might be an opportunity before they built anything or launched it to be like, can we rethink maybe where these go, or
That's a great thing to bring up.
and now we're talking about whether or not we should invite you to the AMS's summer community meeting where this is going to get discussed.
Oh, well, I would tell them that I would love to. I think this is one of the reasons that I bring this up. The more of us in the community that are thinking about this, the more that we can push for this to be considered when it comes up, and to not just think like a physical scientist about, oh, how do I break down the hazard climatology most efficiently and get my radar observations, but how do I think about the people that those decisions could affect? So you guys have done an amazing job digging into this today. I loved all of your ideas. I learned so much, and I'm going to be pulling in some of these layers myself. They're amazing. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to come out, and well done, everybody.